Joining us now, former editor and founder of still editor and founder of the Weekly Standard, and also former chief of staff for Vice President Dan Quayle, Fox News contributor extraordinaire, Bill Kristol. Mr. Kristol, welcome to the show, sir. Great to have you.
And good to be with you. How are you?
Thanks for gracing us with your presence last week in Chesapeake. We appreciate it. And I enjoyed your speech. I thought it was excellent. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Those are nice words, and I really enjoyed the visit. It's great to get out of Northern Virginia, where you get a little bit, too much of the Washington atmosphere and preoccupations, and get out into real Virginia, and it was nice to meet people down there.
Fantastic. I want to get your thoughts on the Maryland situation. Curfew finally over with, but were you a little surprised that these 6 cops got charged so quickly?
Yeah, I guess. And I mean, I've defense attorneys I've listened to on TV and read about seem to think there may be, the charges might be hard to sustain, some of them in court. But I've learned over the years not to second guess these kinds of legal questions. They're so dependent on the facts, and you don't know the facts from outside. I do think I'm distressed by some of the coverage in the sense that there's just no, look what happened to that young man was wrong, obviously, and there was at least negligence, I think it's fair to say, on the part of some of the police. But there's no excuse for the rioting and the looting, the vandalism. I mean, it really is terrible for the people involved. It's terrible for the victims, obviously. It's terrible for the city of Baltimore. And I worry that too many people are excusing it, think, oh, well, it's inevitable. If there's an injustice, there's going to be rioting. You can't have that attitude. That's the attitude that led us into a terrible situation in the 60s and 70s, and it's resulted in the decline of once great cities. And it's the opposite attitude that Rudy Giuliani imposed in New York in the 90s, and it turned around that great city. So I really hate to see Baltimore go the way of Detroit rather than of New York.
Well, Mr. Liberal, some Democrats are saying that the real reason the riot started or continued on in the form they have was not because of what happened to Freddie Gray, but because of income inequality and that the government was not spending enough money in these areas.
Well, Baltimore, I think, has one of the highest per capita expenditures for their public school system. The system is failing. Could use a heck of a lot more competition and probably could use higher standards, all kinds of things that the teachers' unions are undoubtedly blocking. Maryland's been governed by liberals mostly for the last 20, 30, 40 years. Baltimore's been governed by Democrats for 50 years. So that, and the country is right now had a Democratic president for the last 6 years, last I noticed, and a Democratic president for what will it be now? 14 of the last 22 years, I guess,
yep,
Clinton and Obama. So the idea that, throwing more money at the problem is really ridiculous. Look, the epidemic of fatherlessness in the inner cities, we're paying a horrible price for that. People don't like to talk about it, and they don't like to be judgmental and all that. And no one has an easy solution. I don't either, but let's not kid ourselves. When you get kids growing up, it's one thing to have obviously a few kids have always not had fathers because of personal tragedies or divorce or just, unfortunate circumstances. But that's one thing if there are fathers in the next house and then most of the houses on the street and they can sort of step in, and uncles. I mean, you don't have that in the inner city in a lot of places now, and it's really a terrible situation. You saw that mom really admirably trying to get her kids to come back, into the house instead of throwing rocks at police. But, you did it. You saw the mom and you asked, well, where's the dad?
Right. No, I mean, look, that's one of the big issues is you got so many one mom or one dad families in there. I want to get to presidential politics. Hillary Clinton appears to be the inevitable nominee, I guess, now on the Democratic side. Is she beatable in your judgment in 2016? And if so, how?
I think she's quite beatable by a Republican, a younger, forward-looking Republican. I just think she won't do as well as Obama did, and Obama only won by 4 or 5 points. So I feel pretty good about the general election. I got to say, I think I was there at ABC yesterday when Bernie Sanders was on and chatted with him for a second off the air. And I don't know if I were on the left, I would like a challenge to Hillary Clinton. She's talking, there's this big trade issue before Congress. It's a big issue. People can have their own views on it. Some conservatives are split on it. But how can you run for president and not take a position? It's really, how can you not take a position on the Iran deal? How can you, not take a position on the foreign policy of the administration you served for 4 years? I think she could have more trouble than people expect with challenges in her own party as this develops. Right now, everyone's vaguely for her, but I think her support is pretty thin. I don't think Bernie Sanders is going to end up being the nominee of the Democratic Party or the President of the United States.
Right.
O'Malley probably won't either, but they could wound Hillary and cause more trouble for her, I think, than people think.
I mean, this strategy of not saying anything, don't you think pretty fast that's going to wear on people?
Yeah, I do, and I think we've seen that at the state level. I remember in Virginia, this was 20 years ago now, but it's like I had moved fairly recently to Virginia, so I was kind of interested in Virginia politics for the first time. And remember that Mary Sue Terry, I think she was the Attorney General, and she ran against George Allen in '93, and she was ahead by 20-plus points on Labor Day, and she decided to be very cautious and say nothing, and George Allen ran an energetic campaign and beat her. Voters kind of like to hear from their candidates, even if they disagree with them. I think they respect people for telling you their point of view and making their case. And so I really wonder if you're a liberal or progressive, and you probably are against this trade agreement, and you hold against her vote for the Iraq War, and you hold against her close connections with Wall Street. I think she could, she could lose more votes in Democratic primaries than people think.
Now, Mr. Kristol, what do you see on the Republican side? In the next 36 hours, we're going to have 3 new entrants. Carly Fiorina, former CEO, Hewlett Packard. I think Ben Carson kind of got in over the weekend. He's expected to announce, and then Tuesday Huckabee, he's back in. We had Donald Trump on our show last week. He told me that he was going to have some big announcement over the summer. So we could have, 15, 16 viable, I guess, candidates. What happens?
Well, we have a pretty interesting race. I've generally taken the attitude of the more the merrier. I think, they're all entitled to run. It's a wide open race. That's a good thing, I think, for the Republican Party. I think we've had too many kind of coronations, or too many times when there was one or two credible candidates and the rest really weren't. Once you look at these governors, senators, ex-governors, ex-senators, or someone like Carly Fiorina and Ben Carson, private citizens who really have an impressive record, though, of accomplishment. Mm-hmm. You look at that field, and I think it'll help the Republican Party. I think if we look up in that debate in August, even if they have to have 2 debates, but there's so many candidates, 6 or 7 at a time wouldn't be crazy, right? I mean, I think you'll look at that field of Rubio and Cruz and Walker and Christie and Jindal and all the others, Jeb Bush, and you'll think, well, that's a pretty interesting group. It's a pretty impressive group. There are some younger people, some people who are a little older, people who have been governor a long time, like a Rick Perry, people who just got there 3, 4, 5 years ago. And I think it'll help the Republican Party.
Now let's get to national security, if you will. We just had this incident in Dallas where 2 guys shot. And not a lot of detail on it, but my first thought when I saw it is, well, these have got to come out of some kind of a cell in the U.S. somewhere, right?
It sounds like, I think if they're just reporting now, they have the name of one of the people who has been under FBI surveillance for terror-related kind of activities, like he tried to go abroad to join terrorists in the Middle East somewhere. I don't know if it's really a cell. One hopes it's just, a couple of people. So there's not more of an organization behind them, but 2 people can still do a lot of damage and kill people. It's good that the police there seem to react very, very quickly and forcefully. So maybe that will help deter some attacks like this. But look, this is it reminds you look at what happens in France, you look at what happens in other places in Europe, in the Middle East, and you think, well, couldn't happen in the U.S. But it's a good reminder that it's a serious threat here as well.
How do you think whoever the Republican nominee is, Bill Kristol, how do you think they should be handling the ISIS situation?
I think they should say what is right, which is this is a huge failure of President Obama. There was no ISIS when Bush left office. Whatever you think of his handling of the Iraq War, it was a mixed bag. He did have the surge, and we had Iraq fairly well pacified. And I think generally you would have to say the terrorists were on the defensive and somewhat on the run by the end of 2008. And Bush made plenty of mistakes, but at the end of the day, we were winning and they were losing. If you just looked around the world, that was the sense. Obama came in, it was going to be kinder and gentler, and it was going to be a new outreach to the Middle East. And now, and I hate to say this as an American, because it makes me, unhappy and even a little sick, frankly. I mean, we're the ones who are retreating, and the terrorists around the world are on the offensive, and that is a very dangerous situation.
What do we need to do in order to reverse it?
Well, we need to kill a lot of terrorists. We also need to do other things beyond, obviously, pure pure use of force, but that would be a good start. You got to, Osama bin Laden said it's the strong horse and the weak horse in the Middle East. You got to convince people that they're on the losing side, and if you're going to join some terrorist group, you're just likely to get blown up, and no one much is going to remember you or care about you. I think if that message goes out, it gets an awful lot less. Some people will still do it. People are fanatics; they'll join losing sides, but it's easier if you're the strong horse, and I don't think we look like that, and our allies don't look like that now. And unfortunately, we've undercut our allies who want to be strong. So it's like Israel. So I really think I worry about the year and a half of President Obama there running our foreign policy. Congress could do some things to check him, but the next Republican presidential candidate really is going to have to articulate the need for a pretty rapid change of direction.
Final question, Mr. Kristol. Obama's amnesty. You've got at least two Republican presidential candidates playing footsie with it. I don't see, from my own standpoint, where I am, I don't see how you can be the GOP nominee and be in favor of any form of amnesty. What say you?
I think it depends. I don't think we're going to export all 11 million. We probably shouldn't. And so, could you talk about a path to legalization? Sure. I don't think Republicans will support a path to citizenship. And I think they'll also want to make sure the border is secured even before there's a path to legalization. So I think, reasonable people can differ on some of the details of that. Someone like Senator Rubio, I think, has rethought a little bit his support of the Gang of Eight bill. I was against that bill. But I think Republicans want, this time, conservatives are going to want a nominee who they can trust, who they believe, who they just don't feel like is, patting them on the head and is going to go about doing, business as usual, pursuing business as usual in Washington. So I think that'll be an interesting test for some of the candidates who've been more associated with liberal views on immigration, like Rubio. On the other hand, the more conservative candidates are going to have to, be credible in that they could really implement the policies they're talking about. So it'll be very interesting. This is why we have presidential races, why we have debates, why we have speeches, why we have people going on shows like yours to see how they do. I think we'll all learn a lot over the next 6 months.
All right. Well, we are out of time. We want to thank Bill Kristol for being with us. He's the editor and publisher and founder of the Weekly Standard, former Chief of Staff for Vice President Dan Quayle. He is a contributor and predictor and analyst extraordinaire on Fox News and Fox News Sunday. Great to have you with us, Bill.
Hey, thanks very much.